Hello, my name is Amrik, and I'm the Director of Customer Success at Debility, the makers of the SurveyCTO data collection platform. I'm here today to talk to you about field plugins, and I'm also here with some special guests, two early adopters of the SurveyCTO field plugin support. I'm joined by Merab Ali from Innovations for Poverty Action, and Saurabh Bakare from J-PAL South Asia, who've kindly agreed to share some of their experience developing field plugins. So to start things off, here's an overview of what we'll cover in this webinar. We'll get into what a field plugin is. We'll look at some field plugin examples. We'll discuss why you might want to develop a field plugin. We'll hear from Merab, who will discuss the development of his YouTube field plugin. And Saurabh will explain the story of the Exotel field plugin developed by him and his team at J-PAL South Asia. So, what is a field plugin? A field plugin is an extension to existing functionality of a field in a SurveyCTO form. In more detail, a field plugin adds what is called a web view, which allows you to make use of the power and features of web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, all very common today in the web. Literally, field plugins are a zip file archive that contain 4 different files. There is a JSON manifest, an HTML template, a CSS style document, and some JavaScript code. Currently, field plugins support the text, integer, decimal, select one, and select multiple types of fields. But you can build more or less whatever you want on top of text fields. Okay, so that's the technical side of things, but you may be more interested to look at some examples. So if you'll just bear with me a moment, I'm going to swap over to a sample form. So we're going to take a look at some of the improvements and options that field plugins offer you. So to start with, I'm going to show you some baseline field plugin functionality. Our baseline field plugins are actually templates for developers to work from. It's a good idea to work from a template because then you inherit other improvements which we've added, such as superior right to left language support for languages such as Arabic. So if I swap my form over to Arabic, we can see that the text is now right-lined, the radio buttons appear on the right, and the choice labels are also right-lined. Any Arabic speakers in the audience, excuse me, I've used Google Translate for this example, but I imagine it's clear enough. So if I swap back now to the English version of the field, everything is left aligned again. So you can dynamically adapt your form design to fit whatever language audience you have, and field plugins are one way of achieving that. So again, that's just one example. Here we have what we call the table list field plugin. It allows you to arrange a multi-dimensional choice list into a table of sorts. So when a choice list is very long and it has many properties, you might want to use something like this. I could search the column, or we'll sort the column by gender, sort it by age, sort it by grade, because this is a list of students. I could also filter or search for the option that I want. So maybe I'm interested in grade 7s, and I'll pick a grade 7. Okay, so here we see a timer running, and I've only got a few seconds left to correctly answer this question. And if I don't, I'm going to run out of time and automatically be advanced. So that's something new as well with field plugins. You're able to add elements like timers. Here, this field is actually an integer field, but there is a new user interface that has been designed using a field plugin. And I can provide an input by clicking and dragging on this button or slider along this scale. And last but not least, here is an example of another type of plugin-enabled data input. I can rank these items from my favorite to least favorite. So let's say mangoes are my number 1, followed by bananas, but definitely apples are my least favorite. And you'll have a record of the rank established all on one field, thanks to this plugin view for this choice list. Those were just a few examples of what field plugins can do. But also, where can you find field plugins? Well, we have an answer to that. You can look in our field plugin catalog, which you would be able to locate on the support center under reference materials. These are mostly field plugins that have been developed by the SurveyCTO team so far, but we aim to feature field plugins developed by other developers. However, the actual home for field plugins is the GitHub software development project management platform, from where you'll download the files. However, our catalog happens to have direct links to the correct files that you'll need. So you don't necessarily need to take a look at GitHub if it's not something that you are familiar with or comfortable with. So just to illustrate, here is the support center. Under reference material, you'll find the field plugin catalog. There's some categories up top, download links, descriptions of each plugin. So you can have a look at that when you have some time later. So your other option is to develop your own field plugins, because we only have a limited number and there may be objectives that you have which are different. So why develop a field plugin? Well, the decision to develop a field plugin is a decision to solve a problem and satisfy some new requirement. Or you might want to make something that's already possible just a little bit easier for your specific use case. So here are some examples. You can customize the appearance of existing fields, like the color, the size, or placement of elements on screen. You could customize functionality, for example, adding the timer that you saw, or the ability to initiate phone calls, which is something that we've added in another field plugin. You can create new data collection input modes. So, for example, you could add buttons to count something. There's also a field plugin which allows you to design and use clickable images or tappable images. Or you might want to integrate with third-party services over the web, such as YouTube or Exotel, which is something that we're going to hear a bit more about in a moment. So first, I would like to hear from our first speaker. So I'm going to be handing over now to Merab Ali, who works at Innovations for Poverty Action. His role is that of regional technical manager at their global research and data support team. Merab had a particular challenge to solve, for which he decided to design a plugin. Merab, I'm ready to hand over to you whenever you're ready.
So thanks, Amrik. So the problem that Amrik was saying is at the beginning of the lockdown, me and my team was working on developing different tools and resources so that the enumerators team can be trained remotely. So one of the challenges that we're facing is while we planned to use SurveyCTO forms to create training materials, we wanted to include video contents inside the form. So the problem here in Bangladesh is the internet is very slow. And when I was trying to download forms having lots of videos, it was really difficult for me to download with the current internet speed. So one other thing that came to my mind is, what if we can use YouTube? Because YouTube usually uses separate bandwidth and is usually faster to play YouTube videos. At the same time, they can pause and they can watch on their own speed. Although SurveyCTO allows HTML inclusion, I knew that HTML, using HTML, you can embed YouTube videos. But the problem is, in the SurveyCTO form, you cannot embed YouTube videos inside a form. So what can be the solution? So we started thinking, as plugins, the field plugins can give you so much power, including integrating different things in the SurveyCTO form. What if plugins can be helpful to integrate YouTube videos? So the first problem that I faced is I knew a bit of HTML, but I never worked on JavaScript and CSS, and I had no idea how to develop web applications using these three languages. So I started looking at the SurveyCTO documentation, the plugin documentation. That gives me some ideas, and the already developed plugins also gave me sort of templates on that I can start working on. So it literally took me a day to learn to develop web apps, and there are some other, not some, there are actually a lot of resources on JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and integrating them to develop web apps. So, for example, W3 Schools is very renowned for HTML, JavaScript, and CSS resources. So I consulted those documentations and the resources. And if you look at the screen right now, number one window is, the number one box is basically the HTML file, and number two is the CSS file, and number three is the JavaScript file. So whatever you're looking at the window right now is actually the whole program, the whole plugin. So the thing, so this problem probably was not that complex, but in general, this is a very simple program that anyone, I think anyone can develop with if someone has a little bit of background on HTML or any other programming. So, for example, I literally took developed this in a day after learning a web app from the open source resources available in the internet. And the boxes, the code, the lines you're seeing on the screen right now is literally the whole thing. So this solved our problem pretty quickly. And what I learned is maybe this is a simple program, but there are actually a lot of other softwares and other solutions that has APIs and everything that can easily be integrated using these plugins, and we can include that in the SurveyCTO form. So when we created this YouTube plugin, if you look at the right window, the YouTube video can literally integrate it inside the form. So the user do not need to close the SurveyCTO form and open the YouTube app and watch that. The person can watch the video inside the form. This is very similar to the integrated media video file, but the difference is it can now be watched directly from the YouTube. So it solved a lot of things. So as I said, if you're watching from YouTube, it is actually easier because first you can update your video contents very swift, like very easily. At the same time, if you have constant internet, but if you have even though it is slower, it works pretty well because YouTube can buffer over time, right? So I felt YouTube, not only this YouTube problem that I solved, but I felt the field plugin feature that thanks to SurveyCTO they brought this, and this actually has infinite possibilities. You can solve, I think, almost all the problems that we have been facing in the field when we developed SurveyCTO. We can now solve a lot of things. I think almost everything we can now solve using field plugins. And although if you plan to go for complex solutions, that might need you to learn web development further, but for the simple problems, you can easily solve them, even if you plan to start from the scratch. I have been thinking of developing more field plugins to solve some other problems, but I haven't got time yet. But for example, I gave some example here. I saw that Skype, WhatsApp, Exotel, for example. Saurabh will be talking about this later. But all these have APIs, and you can actually use APIs to integrate in your SurveyCTO form. For example, maybe you can place calls using WhatsApp from your SurveyCTO form. So these can solve a lot of problems, those we are facing, especially in this situation where the pandemic is going on and we are working from home and we're doing phone surveys. There can be more other complex ideas. For example, you can probably use Google Calendar. So almost all the Google services has development part and API. So maybe you can use those things to create other solutions if that really is a problem. So the idea, I think, is if you have a problem, probably you can solve it with field plugins, whatever the problem is. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer at the end of this presentation. Thank you, Amrit.
Great. Thank you, Merab. That was very informative. And I'd just like to confirm that Merab's exactly right. Integrations with things like Skype, WhatsApp, with apps locally on Android, as well as web services on the cloud, are all things that are possible. So it really just will take a little bit of time to learn how to develop plugins and apply one's new skills to a problem. So thanks for that. Okay, so last on our agenda, but certainly not least, we'll speak to our second speaker, Saurabh, who is a senior manager, senior research manager, that is, at J-PAL South Asia. J-PAL South Asia have been leading the charge, having recently pivoted much of their data collection to computer-assisted telephone interviewing, which has been significantly enabled by the plugin development they've done. So, Saurabh, whenever you're ready, take it away and maybe explain a little bit of the story behind the work that you guys have done.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Amrit. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Thanks.
Amazing. Okay. So before I get started, I think one thing I want to highlight for everyone is that I might not be the best placed person to talk about the technical aspects that went into the development of this plugin. And I'm sure, Amrit, you can answer any questions that might come on that front. But what I wanted to do is to highlight what I think is a very critical use case for plugins in general, and just walk everyone through how this has allowed J-PAL South Asia to actually resume or start new data collection in the midst of the pandemic and the lockdown across a bunch of projects. One of the immediate effects of the lockdown for us was, and our own decision as well, was to stop all operations altogether, and we stopped all data collection activities, given that most of the data collection in South Asia, J-PAL South Asia, is done through in-person interviewing. So we had to immediately stop all of that. And the other problem that arose with this lockdown was the fact that we also lost access to all of our organizational assets. So all of our devices like tablets and computers and mobile phones that would have been traditionally used for data collection were all in our offices, and we did not want to risk accessing those in the midst of a lockdown. So this presented a very unique situation for us where we did want to move to telephone-based surveys. We wanted to move to CATI, but without access to devices, which meant that our enumerators would have to use their own devices to call respondents. And this is not ideal. This is something that we wanted to avoid because I think most importantly, there's a bunch of reasons to avoid this, but most importantly for us is we want to protect the privacy of people at both ends, both our enumerators as well as our respondents. And we wanted to figure out a way to make these phone calls from enumerators' devices and their phone numbers, but still be able to mask phone numbers on both ends of a phone call. So that was a unique problem that we're trying to solve while trying to figure out the logistics of actually restarting operations through a telephonic interview format. So we knew that we had to access some third-party communications applications to be able to find a call masking, number masking solution. And Exotel is one such communications technology platform that allows you, among a lot of other features, it allows you to sort of mask phone numbers. There are other platforms, similar platforms too. I mean, for those in India currently listening to this, I think there's a bunch of other platforms like Avaz, Paytm, Call Hub, etc., that do provide such services. And I think internationally, I don't know a lot, but Twilio, for example, is another platform that provides very similar services. So there are options available, and how we ended up would be kind of all the features fit very well with all the requirements that we had. The pricing fit with our requirements, and they had amazing customer support. And I think they were fairly quick to respond to our very vague queries on what we wanted to do at that point. And I think we together were able to come up with a solution. And the other problem, of course, that we also wanted to solve was figure out a way to not have enumerators use too many applications on their phones. Exotel, however, only has a web-based platform. It does not have an app in any case, but even if there was, we would have wanted to avoid a separate data collection app and a separate calling app, given that there'll be a single device that enumerators will be using. Now, with all of this in place, the SurveyCTO field plugins came to save the day for us and kind of helped us address both these problems. Of integrating Exotel into the SurveyCTO app itself to create a mobile version of calling through Exotel, as well as making sure that enumerators don't have to navigate through too many apps to do the calling, as well as continue filling out the form. The development of the app itself wasn't very cumbersome, and I think Merab highlighted how straightforward it can be to develop the code for this. And Chris had mentioned to me when I was discussing this with him that it can be a very easy to implement solution if we try it out, and we did give it a shot, and we were able to develop the plugin. I think so. The plugin itself was developed based on the call phone number plugin that SurveyCTO had already developed. The call phone number plugin basically launches the dialer on your mobile through the plugin. And with this Exotel plugin, what we do instead is, instead of launching the dialer, it directly puts in a call to Exotel. And what happens at the Exotel end is basically a virtual number from Exotel basically calls the respondent and the enumerator and basically merges these two calls. So basically the phone number that both the enumerators and the respondents see are this Exotel virtual number that's allocated to a particular research project. So the development of the plugin was pretty straightforward that way. Exotel also, like I'd mentioned before, provides a bunch of other features, including SMS. And going with the same flow of development that SurveyCTO was going with, we also sort of integrated the SMS feature into the same plugin for Exotel, which allows people to send SMSs through the form itself. And I think the only difference is that you have to change the appearance specification in your SurveyCTO form for changing it from a calling to an SMS. Exotel does have a bunch of other features that have been extremely helpful for us, particularly the call recordings and the call reports and the live dashboard that allows you to monitor activities that are happening almost real time with just a couple of hours of delay. And that's been extremely helpful for us. Before I talk about the challenges, I think I want to highlight that the point after that, actually, as of now, I think we have more than 13, actually. I think we've reached close to 15 projects in South Asia. The only ones doing data collection currently, all moving to CATI and all using the Exotel field plugin. And I think across these 15 projects, we've reached around 14,000 or more respondents who've been successfully interviewed through the plugin. And this has been a tremendous development for us in the last month and a half. And I think it'll continue to be so as the lockdown policies and our own organizational policies of work from home continue. I think we'll be continuing to use the app and the plugin across more projects. There are a couple of challenges to keep in mind for anyone considering a solution that is very specific to this use case, like using an Exotel or a Twilio. There could be a problem where ongoing calls get disconnected because of poor connectivity, especially if you're working in a more remote location. And in this case, what it means is that on the SurveyCTO form, you have to navigate back to the page where the plugin is and push the Exotel call again. We've observed so far that this happens more regularly than we had expected. And I think on an average, across the 14,000 respondents that we've tried to reach, I think the average is about 1.5 to 2 calls. It's not too bad, but it's something to keep in mind when you're planning. The other challenge, and I'm not sure if this is applicable to other countries, but very specific to India, was that there is a service that mobile phone users in India can opt into called the Do Not Disturb service. And if you've opted into this regulation, the government regulations prevent from any promotional or commercial calls from telemarketers being made to these numbers. And Exotel is used by companies for marketing purposes. So you have to sort of distinguish yourself from that use of the ICT platform and get an exemption. And just make a case that what you're doing is not actually a promotional commercial activity and you're not telemarketers, and just build the case. It's a pretty straightforward, and Exotel itself helps you out, helps you with getting this exemption. And we were able to do that as well. So these are, I think, the two critical challenges that we've observed, but not too difficult to navigate. And that works out. I think one thing I want to highlight, which I haven't mentioned on my slide, is that Exotel is based off of Twilio. And it's very simple to port any applications, any apps that have been developed for Exotel to Twilio. And Twilio has presence in quite a few countries around the world. So we hope that this plugin might just be helpful for anyone trying to build something similar with Twilio as well outside India. The link to the plugin, of course, Amrik has already shared it. There's enough documentation on there as well. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now or later. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's about it, Amrik. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Saurabh. That's been extremely useful and interesting to learn about. Certainly, the circumstances that J-PAL South Asia have faced in our current situation have been considerable. So, yeah, it's amazing that you guys have been able to react so quickly. And yes, the field plugin timing was was very close. The launch of this functionality was very timely.
Definitely.
So we are at the end of our time. Thank you very much for joining us today. It really has been great having you all on the webinar. So thank you very much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day wherever you are, and stay safe. Thank you.